Okay, we'll call our meeting to order. Let the minutes reflect all members present except for Manager Wynant. And because of that, we'll need an acting secretary today. Any nominations?
Well, I nominate myself.
I'll second that.
That was
All in
easy.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so Mike will do it.
Familiar with the role.
And set the agenda. Anybody like to add or change? Notice that we have amended agenda today. Maybe Nick, you want to explain a little of that?
Yeah, President Priner, staff did add consideration of the petition of Wellington Management and Alliant Bank for the realignment of and abandonment of Anoka County Ditch 5362. That's item 5.
Okay. And I had removed the next two items because we didn't have a full board, so we'll deal with that at a later time when we have a full board. So with that,
President Prime, Board of Managers,
Sure.
I would also note that in the consent agenda, for 19105, it should be conditional approval of 9 items, not 8. And I'll speak to that later in the meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So, Madam President, which two are you removing?
I had removed the, it was 5 and 6.
Okay.
Any
Okay.
other changes? I'll need a motion.
Madam President, I move the agenda as amended.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Approval of the minutes?
Madam President, one thing that I do see here is that under attendance, they do show me attending that meeting, and I was actually absent from that meeting.
President Priner, which minutes we should, the
Oh,
workshop? or-
Workshop, I'm sorry. February 10th workshop minutes, but I will move to approve the February 10th workshop minutes as amended.
Madam President, I was absent, so I'm going to abstain.
We got a second? Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Abstain.
Okay.
And Madam President, I move to approve the February 12th, 2020 regular meeting minutes.
Second.
Motion made and
Pre-
seconded. Any further discussion?
President
Abstain.
Priner? This? Yes, thank you. President Priner, staff do have a couple of adjustments to the meeting
Okay.
minutes. I believe a hard copy was passed out to you, so this shouldn't take but a moment. You'll see on the screen, and as well as your hard copy, we need an S for Greg Bowles at line 14. We'll need the motion on line 31, that the motion carried there 3-0.
Okay.
197, 198, add some language that there was a confirmation that the receipt of bids will come back to the board for the award. Some clarification on line 204 through 206, clarifying that there were gaps in the data set. It wasn't a result of any folly, if you will, of Houston's work, but rather just, in investigation. They found the gaps, and we worked with the DNR to get those addressed or filled. That's why we made the change. And that is it.
Okay. Anything else? So then we need a motion to approve the
Amended.
amended.
Madam President, I move to approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Abstain.
Okay. So we will go ahead and recess our regular meeting, and we're going to do the public hearing on the 2020 Race Creek Stormwater Management Grant funding. The regular board meeting is now recessed, and the public hearing is open on the Race Creek Watershed District's proposed selection of projects for funding through the district stormwater management grant program and/or the Board of Water and Soil Resources Water-Based Funding Pilot Program. The purpose of this hearing is to receive the comments from the public on the projects that the board is considering for cost share assistance in the cities of Arden Hills, Fridley, Hugo, Mahtomedi, St. Anthony, White Bear Township, and Ramsey County. Before the Watershed District can provide funds for the capital work of these applicants, state law requires that the Board of Managers hold a public hearing receive public comments, and make judgment on the selected project is a sound and cost-effective project to help fulfill our water resource goals. This is the purpose of today's hearing. In accordance with state law, notice of the hearing was published for 2 successive weeks in the St. Paul Pioneer Press and mailed to all cities within the Watershed District, as well as the district's 4 counties. First of all, I would ask Kyle Axtell, our project manager, to give brief presentation of the proposed projects. When his remarks are completed, the floor will be open for any members of the public who wish to address the board. At that time, if you wish to comment, please come forward to the podium and state your name and address for the record. If you have a written copy of your statement or any other documents that you would like to submit, please give them to Teresa, our meeting clerk. During public comment, managers are welcome to ask questions of the commenters to clarify the remarks. I will always ask Mr. Axel or representatives of the project applicants to respond to any technical questions raised. Managers will hold their own comments about the project until the public hearing is closed. At that time, the board will have the opportunity to discuss it. Kyle, would you like to proceed?
Madam President, thank you, members of the board and the public. We'll try and run through here with a brief description of each of the projects. First, I'll run through a brief summary of the program goals, incorporation of the Bowser Watershed-Based Funding Pilot Program, again, some of the guidelines for the program, and then we'll touch on those applications and look at next steps later in the meeting. The goals of this program that we have are to encourage local government units and others within the district to explore stormwater quality and quantity retrofit opportunities and incorporate those opportunities into their development and infrastructure projects. We're looking to foster collaboration with our partners on these stormwater quality and quantity improvement efforts, as well as innovation, and we're looking to create demonstration and education examples around the district. And in general, looking to defray local costs in the broader watershed-wide interest of improving water quality and decreasing flood damage risk. We are wrapping up our use of grant funds provided by Bowser's Watershed-Based Funding Pilot Program. This originally began in 2019. We had a $413,000 grant from Bowser through that program. There were all but $20,790 were allocated last year, and so we have this little bit of money left over in Ramsey County that we are making available this year to fully utilize that grant. And those funds can be combined with our own local funds to maybe provide a more impactful grant to a high priority project. Again, these funds are specifically only for water quality improvement portions of projects, whereas Rice Creek's funds can be used for water quality or flood control. Applications were due at the very end of last year, December 31st. Again, we've got $300,000 of Rice Creek funds available in addition to that $20,000 and change from the Watershed-Based Funding Pilot Program. The maximum request is $100,000 per project, although stormwater reuse irrigation projects may be eligible for up to $10,000 per acre irrigated. We do require a 50% match from local applicants for our own funds, and the watershed-based funds carry just a 10% match. So here's a map showing where our applications came from this year. We had 8 overall. There were 2 applications in basically the same spot there on Karth Lake in Arden Hills, but we had a pretty good spread across the district this year. And we'll run through these just alphabetically, starting with the first project in the city of Arden Hills, Karth Lake Runoff Control. And this project aims to stabilize a steep eroded hillside adjacent to Karth Lake by installing storm sewer piping to eliminate some serious overland runoff issues from a large commercial parking lot. And this project is BMP number 1 in the district's 2009 Southwest Urban Lakes Management Action Plan for Karth Lake. The eligible project cost is $180,000. The city has requested 50%, $90,000, and water quality benefits have been indicated as shown by the city. No flood control benefit with this project. Here's some maps and photos of the project location. As you can see, it's quite steep and heavily eroded. The private landowner has attempted to make repairs here, and those repairs have repeatedly not held up, so a larger solution is warranted. Most of the project site is on city property, but the very top of the hill is private. Second project proposed by the City of Arden Hills is also on Karth Lake. This is a different slope stabilization project that would look to preemptively replace a failing timber retaining wall at the Karth Lake pumping outlet station. The concern here is that future failure of the wall would lead to a significant discharge of sediment into the lake. Estimated cost is $100,000. The city has asked for $50,000. We do identify this as a prevention of a future problem at this time. So here's a picture of the wall that was provided by the city. I believe it's 3 or 4 tiers of timber walls that have been put in place there. It was an old Eagle Scout project about a decade ago. So that's that site. City of Fridley, Village Green Stormwater Detention. This is a reapplication for a project that was previously awarded funds and delays led it to not be implemented yet. And so that previous funding has lapsed. This is reconstruction of a regional pond at Village Green Apartments in the city of Fridley. They'd be looking to expand storage volume, both live storage and dead storage, to provide water quality treatment and flood storage. The property is notably located just outside of the political boundary of the Rice Creek Watershed District, although 80 acres within the district flow through this regional pond and back into the district. If we were looking at a boundary change in this area, the parcel would likely come into our jurisdiction. Eligible project cost is estimated at $300,000. The city has requested $100,000, and the water quality benefits as shown, 49.5 pounds a year of phosphorus and 8.2 tons per year of sediment, as well as the flood control benefits there. And here's existing and proposed grading plan for the site. I feel like I had something else I wanted to mention about this one, but I can't think of it right now, so we'll move on. City of Hugo, County Road 8 stormwater reuse. This is, again, reuse irrigation of 6.3 acres of maintained landscaping and turf grass, from converting it from potable water source to stormwater. This is along CASA 8 or Main Street, Frenchman Road, through the center of Hugo. And the project will draw water from a stormwater pond that is in line with Branch 3 of Anoka, Washington, JD3. Target water bodies here are Ditch 3, or also known as Clearwater Creek, and Peltier Lake. Eligible project cost is $545,000, and the city has requested $100,000. I will note that the district currently has $60,000 allocated to this project from a previous year's program. Since that time, our guidelines have changed, and whereas we were previously limited in the amount of funds that could be offered, the cap has been raised to $100,000, and the city is applying in an effort to utilize the additional funding. So if this were to be awarded, the prior $60,000 cost share agreement would be terminated and replaced with this. So it'd be a net increase of $40,000 from this year's funds. Water quality benefits are estimated at 22 pounds per year of phosphorus. Flood control estimated at 12.3 acre feet a year, and then the savings of groundwater amounts to about 4 million gallons a year that is used to irrigate this area. And this map shows that area. It's essentially all of the boulevard areas from Highway 61 all the way to Elmcrest in the city of Hugo. And Branch 3 comes down from the north, and it's this large pond right here at the bottom end of Branch 3 that is where the pump would be located.
Kyle, just for clarification, that 4 million gallons of groundwater, that's actually potable water that comes out of the aquifer, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah,
Yep.
So that's just a tremendous savings there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And one of the reasons that we've been promoting groundwater or stormwater
Well,
reuse projects.
I just want to make clear, because the words groundwater, people don't always associate that with, that this was drinking water that isn't being used for, we're substituting surface water for this and not using the aquifer or storage for the drinking water.
That is correct.
Madam President, the going from $60,000 to $100,000, I'm just trying to understand it. only 40,000 of it, though, is coming out of the current budget?
If it were approved, that would be correct.
Okay, so we're still only giving the $320-some thousand dollars.
Correct. Correct.
Thank
Yep,
you.
yep. I can touch on that later when we get to funding recommendations later in the meeting. Okay, City of Mahtomedi, they are on to Phase 4 of their historic district improvements, and this project proposes installation of a hydrodynamic separator, swirl separator, and as well as a sump catch basin with a saffle baffle to improve stormwater treatment during that reconstruction project. The base project as designed does not trigger our Rule C requiring water quality treatment. And so these additional practices that are above and beyond our rules are eligible for cost share assistance. Target water body here is White Bear Lake, and the eligible project cost, as identified by Rice Creek staff, is a hair over $82,000. The original estimate from the city was substantially higher than that. There's a number of items in there, of their line items, that are not eligible for cost share assistance that have to do with storm sewer piping and things that they're doing anyway for drainage for the project. Their original cost share request was $50,000, and obviously that would be limited by the determined eligible project cost. Water quality benefits are mostly sediment related. They've identified 2.4 tons per year and did not provide a phosphorus reduction estimate. And this project does not have flood control benefits.
Kyle, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
There's like 3 of them that have no benefits as far as flood control. Is there anything that could have been done to enhance the project to include some flood control, since that is an upcoming issue?
Right. You know, every site's a little different. Speaking to this project in particular, their right-of-way is very limited in this neighborhood, and implementing any sort of flood control measures here would require storage, and whether that's above ground or underground, and they really don't have room for it here, in my opinion. Which is also why we're seeing the practices proposed, which are underground, proprietary low footprint BMPs. It'd be great if we could come through here and do a bunch of infiltration basins and things to get more water quality treatment than what's being proposed, but the space just simply is
It
not
just
there.
isn't,
Yeah.
Okay,
Madam President?
thank you.
Kyle, could you go back one slide?
Yes.
The 82,300 has an asterisk in it. Did you explain that? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
So I can pull up what the original cost estimate was for that project. I can find it here. There we are. Hold on one second. So their original cost estimate for the entirety of the work, I believe, was $436,000. A number of the line items in the materials that were provided are really for, I would say, routine storm sewer work or a replacement of existing infrastructure, just to provide basic stormwater drainage for the area. And those are practices that would not be eligible, or items that would not be eligible for cost share assistance through this program. So pulling out those costs tied with specifically the items that are above and beyond our rules, I come up with about $82,000.
Thank you.
And again, this shows the locations that they're requesting funds for. I'll note also the original request, there are 3 sites identified. We're looking at these southern 2 sites with the saffle baffle down here and the hydrodynamic separator here. This northern site only proposed a sumped catch basin, which would likely be required by our rules if this new storm sewer outlet were approved through permits. So this site would not be eligible for funding. It's also a very minor cost compared to the other 2. City of St. Anthony, 2020 street and utility improvements. Again, similar project, proposing installation of a CDS brand hydrodynamic separator to a storm sewer outfall from the Silver Lake Terrace area to Silver Lake. This is during another street reconstruction project. Again, similar. The project would not require water quality treatment as designed through our rules, and so this BMP is above and beyond and eligible for cost share assistance. This applicant requested the watershed-based funding pilot program funds. Their eligible project cost is $65,000. and change. And so the total cost share request between the watershed-based funds and Rice Creek funds is just over $43,000. Again, some moderate water quality benefits identified, and again, no flood control in this case. So this site, it's about a 3-acre or so drainage area on the south side of Silver Lake, and they'd be installing the BMP at the very bottom end or downstream end of the storm sewer system before it discharges to the lake. And then here's a schematic of the inner workings of that CDS unit. Water swirls around and filters through before it's discharged. Very, very common BMP that we see a lot. Ramsey County, their application is proposing a replacement of existing failed culverts at Eagle Street on Ramsey County Ditch 11. This is directly adjacent to the iron enhanced sand filter that we will be constructing on Ditch 11 later this year. The project would join those two failed culverts into a single manhole and stabilize the entire road embankment. This is another one where much of the project cost that's identified is not eligible for funding. The culverts are the responsibility of the road authority, in this case Ramsey County. Some of the, maybe the manhole that they're proposing is in addition to the site and would reduce further future erosion, as well as some of the bank restoration work. They did request watershed-based funds as well, but we've identified their eligible project cost at maybe around $22,000. Again, some water quality benefits identified there. Again, no flood control. This is the site here, and I've got a couple of photos these are actually photos taken by Rice Creek staff of the site, so you get an idea. It's a pretty heavily eroded site, but this work is scheduled and would be completed in the spring. White Bear Township, their application is another street reconstruction project similar to others we've had. And this would be installation of 2 sumped catch basins with SAFL baffles to improve stormwater treatment during this reconstruction project. Again, the project as designed, I believe, doesn't trigger Rule C water quality requirements, or if it does, they're addressing that through other means. So these BMPs would be in addition or above and beyond minimum requirements. Target water body is White Bear Lake, and eligible project cost. In this case, I should say, I'll step back. So their original application identified a project cost of $66,000 or so. So the request was for half of that. One of the 2 locations they've identified, and I'll bring this up on the map here, is considered redundant as we've taken a look at this. So this is Arbor Drive neighborhood just on the south side of White Bear Lake. They're proposing a SAFL baffle here, as well as over here. And the arrows that I've added indicate the flow direction. This one we feel is a great location. It's downstream from a bunch of currently untreated roadway. However, the site here, which would capture runoff from this area, as it leaves this site, it goes down the County Road F storm sewer and then back to Arbor Drive here. As it's flowing along County Road F, and it's not able to be shown on the screen here, a previous project that we cost shared with the township on diverts flow from that County Road F storm sewer into a stormwater treatment basin, and there's also a hydrodynamic separator under County Road F that was installed, and that was maybe back in 2010. So this SAFL baffle here isn't really providing any additional benefit to the lake beyond what these other existing BMPs would do. So we think this one's a great spot to capture and treat runoff from Arbor Drive, but this one over here on Lakewood is pretty redundant. So, yeah. So again, their eligible project cost was we've reduced that to half of what was proposed. That's all I have on the applications. Our next steps would be for consideration of awards, selecting projects during the regular meeting later today.
Any other questions from the board? If not, I think we do have somebody on it. Is there anything you'd like to speak to? Okay, well, with that, I think we'll close our public hearing. We'll go back to our regular agenda, which would now bring us to the consent agenda, which is Patrick. Thank you, Kyle.
right. President Preiner, Board of Managers. For the consent agenda, no changes proposed to 19088. As I mentioned with the setting of the agenda, there are some changes to 19105. I believe a handout has been provided. I can also bring it up here on the screen just to show the changes. These are based on legal reviews comments just to make those changes. Had a couple of staff illnesses last week, and so I apologize for having to bring this up now. But
No problem.
so that should be, let's see. Changes will be shown here in red. So we do have a new caprock item, something that we want to see found on the final plans for the outlet control structure. Under administrative, a change in the application fee that is required, just making the number consistent throughout the document. In the description of the project, just making a further distinction between phases 1 and 2. Phase 1 was already approved previously with permit 1846. So these changes just show, the specific homes that will be constructed under phase 2.
Excuse me, did we have these
I don't
changes?
see any changes.
Oh, okay,
Oh,
okay. I just
I
want to
thought
make
so.
sure we're not looking.
I'm sorry.
Okay,
Yeah.
no problem.
Okay,
Okay.
sure. Are there any concerns you want me to step back?
No, no, go
Okay,
ahead.
sure.
We just thought we might have them.
Sure.
I thought you said handout, so that's why I was
Sure,
searching.
okay,
Yeah.
sure. So then that was the description. And then just a further clarification here in the drainage area table and what's going to ACD 55. And I believe that is
Could you
the,
slow up on that last one?
sure.
Just give me a chance to read it. Thank you.
I think that is the last change, numerically, phase 1 and phase 2. I guess that's the last thing. Yeah. Okay. Questions?
Questions for Patrick? Go ahead, comment.
I was just gonna, President Preiner, I was just gonna note if the board would like, we can certainly mail these out. If John might like a copy of it for your
Yeah,
record. or-
I'd like a copy of it. then.
Sure.
Yeah,
Because I wasn't fast enough to write down whatever you do.
Yeah, that should be fine. I don't need any, so. All right, so any questions for Patrick again? Any comments? Why don't you roll back that a little bit slow? Let's
Sure.
re-pick up a little.
I can go back up here a little bit.
Yeah. Just in case there's something still.
So this is the additional conditional approval item that wasn't shown originally on the
Yeah.
ER. Pretty typical item that we do require, that we need to see on the final plans for projects like this.
Cost adjustment.
I think the next one was just into the description.
Yeah, okay.
President Preiner,
Mm-hmm.
if I could, Patrick, would you go back up to the other one?
Certainly, that's why I'm here.
Appreciate it. So the fee, right?
Oh,
Is it-
sure.
So there was a
I'm
change
sorry.
in the fee amount there. And we did have a little bit of a discussion in the office about this. The board does have a resolution that requires us to have the fee included before we bring it to the board. But as you know, periodically, like on a variance, the final billing isn't sorted out and that sort of thing. So you should be aware that we're operating in that, what
That
I
framework.
say, practical way of doing it.
So, Madam President, just for my confusion here, 11,000's crossed out 4375. Is that 43 supposed to be a zero then for the new?
It'd be 11,475.
11,400, oh, I see.
Yep.
I'm reading it wrong with my glasses. I see that there's a little space in there if I use the trifocals.
Yes.
Right.
So it's 475, all right?
Yep,
All right, any other questions?
I didn't know if we were missing a zero back.
sure. Can add some commas in there.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Very good, thank you, Patrick.
Mhm.
So the next thing we need on here is to go to our consent agenda to include the corrections.
Madam President, I'll move approval of the Cap Rock consent agendas with corrections, 19-088 and corrections for 19-105.
To include, the cap rack is 9.
9, yes,
Items.
well, it should be 9 items, and for all the corrections that he
Yeah.
provided,
Yep.
so on the red lines that are in there, so we'll have it.
I second that.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Open mic. Anybody in the audience that'd like to speak? Any issues? Seeing none, we'll go back and continue to items requiring board action. Kyle, I believe you're next.
All right, President Reiner, members of the board, thank you. We'll continue with our discussion on the grant applications. Bring this up here. All right. So we went through our descriptions of the projects earlier. Staff individually, Lauren and I, reviewed each of the applications and scored them using the criteria in the program guidelines. Houston Engineering, we also had complete individual reviews of each application, not only to provide scoring, but also some technical review, feasibility review of each of the projects. Those are all contained within your packet for review. And then we met with the CAC on February 5th and went through the projects with them and got scores from that group as well. The results of all of that scoring is aggregated here on the screen in front of you and also in your packet on page 35. And so we have the final scores as shown here. Funding that we have available was spread out basically down that list, again with a couple of modifications that I'll note. We did not have enough funds for every application this year. The total requests, I think, added up to just over $500,000. And so where this falls out and what our final funding recommendation is we've got enough, at least for full or partial funding, for 6 applications. So we mentioned earlier that City of Hugo, their application scored at the top. Really what we're looking at is an allocation of $40,000 from this year's budget. We would combine that with the prior approval of $60,000 for a total of $100,000. So you'll see in the resolution that it refers to an award of $100,000 that's contingent on the termination of that prior agreement. City of Fridley then is second, so we have full award there. City of Arden Hills, the Karth Lake runoff control, that's the large eroding hillside off of CSM property. White Bear Township again, with the note that the one of the sites is considered redundant, so we've got an award there for 50% of one of those sites. City of St. Anthony, they were the highest ranked applicant that requested the remaining watershed-based funds, so those funds are allocated, and then remaining allocation from the Rice Creek Watershed District funds as shown. And then City of Mahtomedi, we don't have enough to fully fund their request, but we've got $30,000 left. I have had email discussion with the City of Mahtomedi and White Bear Township about the reduced awards, and both municipalities were willing to accept those amounts as proposed. And then unfortunately, funding is not available for Ramsey County or the second project from Arden Hills, which were ranked near the bottom. So that's what is proposed. I have rounded each of these award amounts kind of up to the next $1,000 for simplicity, which gets us to that point. If you have any questions or comments.
Madam President,
Go ahead.
how much money would we have needed to budget in order to fund the Ramsey County and the City of Arden Hills?
As it stands, we're about maybe $60,000 or so short, given the limitations on eligible funds for the Ramsey County site. Yeah, so.
Thank you.
Other questions? If not, I think we have a resolution on page 36.
That is correct. We have, again, staff's recommendation is approval of Resolution 2020-04. And I believe that's that. Yeah, we've got that identified. Again, just noting that we do have that, it looks like Hugo's getting $100,000. They are. That will be contingent upon the termination of the additional agreement. I believe I have that identified in the resolution.
Okay.
Madam, excuse me, Madam President, I move to approve, what resolution is it?
Go to the next one. Yep.
There we go. Resolution 2020-04, ordering the stormwater management grant projects pursuant to Minnesota statutes 103B.251 with the following resolutions. Therefore, be it resolved that pursuant to Minnesota statutes 103B.251 and the water management plan, each of the projects is ordered, and be it further resolved that the Board of Managers hereby authorizes the administrator to execute each of the respective cost-share agreements between the Rice Creek Watershed District and the cities of Hugo, Fridley, Arden Hills, St. Anthony, and Mahtomedi, and White Bear Township, with any final non-material changes and on advice of council. And be it further resolved that the Board of Managers direct the administrator to terminate the March 21st, 2017 cost-share agreement between the district and the city of Hugo. And finally, be it further resolved that the limit of the district contribution to each project is as follows. City of Hugo, County Road 8, stormwater reuse, $100,000. City of Fridley, Village Green, stormwater detention expansion, $100,000. City of Arden Hills, Karth Lake runoff control, $90,000. City of St. Anthony, 2020 street and utility improvements, $43,790. City of Mahtomedi, Phase 4 West Historic District improvements, $30,000. And finally, White Bear Township, Southeast Street reconstruction, stormwater improvements for $17,000.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. It'd be a roll call. Waller?
Yes.
Wyman absent. Bradley?
Yes.
Wageman?
Yes.
Reiner, yes. Motion passes. Okay, Kyle,
Madam
you-
President, members of the board, thank you. We will carry on with that.
Madam President, I'm always impressed at how difficult this project is to try to balance everything. And I think everyone did a really good job. I appreciate it.
And I think it gets better as we refine it more. It's easier and it's
Yeah.
more definite for the cities to apply. Go ahead, Kyle. Thank
All
you.
right. Okay, next on our agenda, Madam President, members of the board, we have consideration of a purchase order from EPG Companies Incorporated. This is related to our iron enhanced sand filter project on Ramsey County Ditch 11, which was released for bid at the last meeting. Part of the way this project has been structured, the actual development, design, programming of the coding and development of the equipment configurations for this project is being essentially owner supplied. So we're asking the contractor to install equipment that we will be purchasing separately and providing for installation at the site. And we've been working with EPG companies on this. They've provided the design and fabrication for the previous two iron enhanced sand filter projects that the district has implemented at Hanson Park and Oasis Pond. So we're looking to continue working with them so that we have a continuous, seamless operating system between the three sites for ease of use for district staff, as well as the fact that it's a really kind of a custom system. It's similar to what we've done with Procom in the past. In an ideal world, it'd be great to go and find multiple quotes for this type of equipment, but it's really not something that is considered feasible, especially when you take into account the idea that we need all these systems to essentially operate in the same fashion with the same operation controls and all of that. And we really look at it as, you know, the bulk of the work that we're doing with EPG. EPG is the technical and design service side of it. Much of if you'd call it off-the-shelf components, the pump, things like that they're providing, they're actually supplying these things and manipulating them in their shop in order to make them work for what we need. So they're not, you know, the items are not something you can just go buy a pump from somewhere and put it in the site, right? Additionally, there aren't other regionally based companies that offer this, you know, this exact type of service and equipment that we need. We tried that. Both of the last two projects were offered as, through the competitive bidding process as approved equal. We ended up with EPG both times. We had alternate systems attempted to be submitted at the Oasis Pond site. They couldn't meet the spec, which caused a lot of delays and issues with that project. So this is our preferred route. We have a quote and a draft purchase order in the packet for EPG at $56,493 plus freight. They don't know that cost. It's estimated at $150. And that would be providing all of the controls and equipment that we need for the system. So we'd like to get that going, so we have the equipment ready to go come this summer when the contractor hopefully starts on or shortly after the 1st of July. Open to any questions on this. If you have any, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to add right now.
Any questions on the board, from the board? If not, I think we have, on 148, we have a proposed motion.
Madam President, I'll move to authorize the district administrator to submit purchase order number BELIESF 2020 dated 02/26/2020 to EPG Companies Incorporated.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Madam President, I just point out that, to make sure, reemphasize what Kyle has already said, that in building these systems, they're standardized for our needs. They're all identical type systems. And so each one is not unique to the situation necessarily. It's just, we need a particular system and to work and for our specs. And I think that's important, so that they're uniform across our maintenance needs.
Okay,
Madam
thank you.
President, if I may, the one other point I wanted to add, we did take a look. The cost that's shown here as well is pretty consistent with the past two installations we had. Hanson Park was a larger system. There were 4 beds. That came, even competitive bid, that came in at about $69,000. And then the Oasis Pond site was right around $50,000. So and those were several years ago as well. So I think we're right in the ballpark here.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Okay, Lauren.
Good morning, President Preiner, Board of Managers. For your consideration today is the City of Grant's local water plan. In your packets, you'll find, starting on page 158, the draft resolution, the executive summary on page 160, the city's identified issues on page 161, and the city CIP table on page 164. City of Grant submitted their local water plan to all agencies for formal agency review on March 21st of last year. The district reviewed for consistency with the district's watershed management plan, Minnesota Rules 8410, Minnesota Statute 103B 235, and the district and Met Council submitted comments on the plan. The city's final draft submitted to the district on February 18th of this year sufficiently addresses all comments and is now consistent with the district and state requirements. The city has identified a few water resource issues within the district boundary, mostly regarding water quality. These are discussed in more detail on page 162. And just for your reference, I have here a map of the watershed district boundaries in the city of Grant. Rice Creek is the salmon color in the northwest portion of the city. And within the city, Fish Lake is impaired for nutrients. The city also drains to other impaired waters, in other communities, such as the Ramsey, Washington Judicial Ditch 1, Clearwater Creek, Bald Eagle Lake, Peltier Lake, and the Mississippi River. City is also a regulated MS4 on the Bald Eagle Lake TMDL, the Peltier and Centerville Lake TMDL, and the Upper Mississippi River Bacteria TMDL. So to help improve water quality and address these TMDLs, the City of Grant will continue to administer their water quality policies, which include the working with the district to implement BMPs and studies as opportunities are identified. They will also continue to educate their residents on cleaning up after their pets to reduce E. coli, which is on page 162. And the city will also enforce their existing ordinances and update their erosion and sediment control ordinance, which they've included on their CIP table on page 164 and is on this slide here. No specific projects with the city have been identified by the district or the city for this plan cycle. To conclude, the City of Grant's plan is consistent with district and state requirements. Staff recommends approval of the City of Grant's local water plan as submitted to the district on February 18th of this year. Any questions?
Questions for Lauren?
Well, Madam President, congratulations on getting Grant to bring it.
Well, Madam President,
I know the goal was by December, but this is pretty good, huh?
yeah,
Yeah.
Madam President, I too want to acknowledge, I looked at it, my goodness, they originally provided this back in March of last year. It's been almost a year to get it through, but then I look and see that 8 months was spent between the review by Metropolitan Council and their response to it. So I don't put that on our shoulders in any respect.
No, or the city of Grant's shoulders either.
Right.
But I still think getting it done, and, we're getting down to, we had 28 cities
Yep.
to begin with, and, we're pretty close to meeting that goal.
Yep.
Yeah, you've done.
That's just, how do you do, heard 28 cities? I mean, wow.
Madam President, how many are we down to?
If this one is approved today, we'll be down to 4.
All right.
We're almost there.
Very good.
It's getting there.
Okay, we'll need the resolution on page 158.
Madam President, I move to offer Resolution 2020-05 and its adoption, which approves the city watershed, city water plan from the city of Grant.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Further discussion? There'll be a roll call. Waller?
Yes.
Wyant absent. Bradley?
Yes.
Wagaman?
Yes.
Reiner, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you.
See you back. We'll get forward on next time. All right, I believe we have Nick next.
Yes, President Preiner, Board of Managers. Now we turn to Anoka, Washington Judicial Ditch 3, the main trunk and branch 3, where we did receive our bids back, and we're asking the board to consider notice of award. We sent out the solicit for the bids and the repair project. It does include an alternate for 157th Street, a culvert there as that part of that bid. Bids were received back in February 13th. Houston Engineering has completed a review of those and created the memo that's in the packet here on page 168. And their recommendation is to accept the low bid and award that to Mahtomedi and Sons in the amount of $716,991. The notice of award would include alternate 1, which it would have its own notice to proceed once those items are clarified in working with the city of Hugo. We're happy to answer any questions you might have by Chris or myself.
Any
Madam
questions?
President? I'll note a couple things here from the memo. First thing is under the section review of bids on page 169, just wanted to note that we did find one irregularity with the bid from Mahtomedi and Sons in that they did not acknowledge addenda number 4. However, after reviewing the content of addendum number 4, we determined that it was immaterial to the quantity or cost of materials within their bid and within the specifications. And so we feel it's reasonable to waive that irregularity in light of the content of that addendum, that it wouldn't materially change their bid. It was simply more of a clarification that we provided with that addendum. Again, you'll notice that the bid amount that they have is a fair amount lower than next bid. We have not, at least I haven't in my experience worked with Mahtomedi and Sons, but they have been around a long time. We have known from hearsay from other folks
They
that
have a
they're a
very good
reputable
reputation.
company and that they have the qualifications to complete the work. So we have no concerns regarding that. And as Nick noted, we do have that alternative number 1 that we included, and that was regarding the lowering of a culvert under one of the city streets, and we had that as a bid alternative as there is some question of whether or not we may or may not need to complete that as part of the work. So we feel that, again, we recommend that at this time that the bid be awarded for the full amount of work, including the alternative 1, but as Nick noted, not to provide a notice to proceed on that second part of work until we fully know whether or not we want to complete that portion of it.
Okay. So we have resolution on page 173.
Madam President, I'll move resolution 2020-06. Resolution awarding contract for the repair of Anoka, Washington County Judicial Ditch 3, Main Trunk, and Branch 3. Therefore, be it resolved that the Rice Creek Watershed Board of Managers that A, contract for the repair of Anoka, Washington Judicial Ditch 3, Main Trunk 3, and Branch 3 is awarded to Mahtomedi and Sons Incorporated for a contract price of $716,991.00. B, that the district administrator shall sign and transmit the notice of award, sign the construction agreement, and issue notice to proceed on the advice of council and the district's engineer when prerequisites for issuance have been met by the contractor. C, the notice of award shall state that each portion of the project based on bid and bid alternate 1 shall have its own notice to proceed. D, that the district administrator shall sign change orders increasing the contract price to an aggregate net amount not to exceed 20% of the contract price.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Will be roll call. Waller?
Yes.
Wynand absent. Bradley?
Yes.
Wakeman?
Yes.
And Reiner, yes. Motion passes. Okay, now we have the addition. Nick?
Yes, President Preiner, Board of Managers, this is the item that was added to our agenda. You do have a handout in regards to it. This is for 5362. You did receive a petition back in December from Wellington Management along with Alliance Bank for realignment and abandonment of that system. You directed Houston Engineering to complete a report, which they have done, and it is included in the handout that you received. Chris will give us a little presentation on what this work, what they found based on the petition and what the party's asking for. And then we're looking through resolution for you to, after consideration of what Chris has to offer and any questions, to accept the report and then to set the public hearing to move the petition process forward.
Madam President, Board of Managers. This area should be relatively familiar to you in that we have had similar requests along Anoka County Ditch 5362 both just to the upstream, to the north, and to the downstream, for doing similar types of realignments in conjunction with development that's occurred in this area. And I'm not going to go over every single bit of my presentation here because you'll be seeing it again at the public hearing, but I just wanted to hit some of the high points here so you're aware of the content that we have within our report, and then you can make a decision to accept it and then move forward for the public hearing. And as we always do, we include information regarding the petition purpose and the statutes which are involved, which in this case include 227 for rerouting the drainage system and 805, which is for partial abandonment of the drainage system. So this graphic I have shown here on the screen shows in purple the project area that is in question. That's just a rough area. The actual development is a little bit larger, extends in a little bit bigger of area, but just wanted to show you generally where that project location is. And again, to the north of this project area, upstream was Sanctuary Preserve, where we had a similar request for realignment, and to the south across 109th Street is another development, and I apologize, can't remember the name of the development, but it is another one that we have had a realignment request. And so what this request affects is actually three different branches of the public drainage system. The main trunk that you see on the screen, which runs from north to south, branch 4, which parallels 109th Avenue, and branch 5, which also parallels 109th Avenue coming from west to east. This is one example of a previous modification that was made to the drainage system. This is that plat that is to the south of 109th Avenue, and you can see that has a realignment here shown in dashed red color of the main trunk. And at that time, it also similarly affected branches 4 and branches 5, which really did not change structurally, but had a changing of designation or branch because of where the realignment occurred. And we're going to have something very similar with this request. So what the applicant is proposing, and I'll show on a graphic here in a little bit, is on the main trunk to realign the main trunk to be along the west side of the development. This is so that it doesn't cut through lots and that it will allow other stormwater features proposed on this site to occur and to outlet in the drainage system as it's being designed. Includes a crossing under 109th Street through an existing culvert that is a very similar size to the other culvert that the main trunk currently flows through. And it would be proposing to abandon the remaining remnants of the main trunk through the parcel. Branch 4 would be modified, as I noted earlier, by essentially changing designation. It would be extended. A portion that is currently referred to as the main trunk would now be referred to as branch 4. Likewise, branch 5 would have a portion of it that would be eliminated as being branch 5, but instead becoming the main trunk. And I'll show you here on this graphic where the proposed modifications will occur. The graphic right now shows the existing alignment of the main trunk in red, the branch 4 in green, and branch 5 in purple. If you watch closely to the graphic as I move to the next, or the proposed modification here, the main trunk, as you can see now, is being proposed to be realigned further to the west. And just to the outside or north and west of a proposed pond to be constructed as part of the project. We'd be providing, or I should say the applicant would be providing an access corridor along the north and west sides of the ditch in order to be able to complete future maintenance. And as you can see on the graphic, the branch 4 shown in green was made longer incorporating previous part of the main trunk, and branch 5 shown in purple became shorter, becoming incorporated into the main trunk. Some of the design requirements that we've provided for other locations where relines have occurred, and specifically on those plats to the north and to the south, that it be constructed at the as constructed and subsequently improved grade of the drainage system. And you likely are aware that this is a location on the main trunk of No County Ditch 5362 where there's actually a flat grade for over a mile in this location. And so they are providing, again, that a similar flat grade along their proposed alignment. Yes?
What's a cross slope?
So when we refer to cross slopes, if we're looking at a cross section of the ditch, it's going to have a trapezoidal shape, and the cross slope is what we refer to as the slope from the top of the bank down to the bottom of the ditch. So we refer to that as the cross slope, and then we refer to the slope that goes parallel to the ditch being the grade of the drainage system.
Okay, thank you.
So we would be proposing in this case, or I should say the applicant is proposing in this case to have 2-to-1 side slopes. The 2-to-1 side slopes will be sufficient to prevent undue erosion along the ditch banks. And then along the corridor, it would be proposed to have 20 feet of access corridor on one side of the open channel and of the pond. I should change the slide to state pond rather than lake. The applicant is not creating a lake in their project corridor. And the access corridor also will include a 20% longitudinal grade going along the drainage system, max along that access corridor. That again will be able to provide a standard piece of equipment, an excavator, to be able to access along there. And we require a maximum of 5% cross slope again for the access for maintenance with that type of equipment. And then the applicant will be providing an easement over the access corridor and the channel from bank to bank.
Madam President?
Yes.
This is education, Mike Bradley time again. So basically, we're going to have a brand-new ditch, mile long or something. If we were doing this now for the first time, basically, should this stuff be going into culverts? I mean, not culverts, but pipe? Or are open ditches still better?
Oh.
Here's an opportunity to have a better system going in, is the question.
Manager Bradley, that's a good question. So in this particular area, it's actually where the drainage system would be best served continuing to have a open channel in here. And that's for a couple of different reasons. One is that the size of the drainage area, or I should say the size of the cross section that's required to convey flow through there is very large. So in order to have something that would be adequate, you would need to have a very long box culvert that would be extending along this whole way. And then in that case, then if you have that long box culvert, you'd have basically infrastructure that would be a lot more challenging or difficult for district staff to actually maintain because the staff isn't set up to handle essentially storm sewer. So actually, it's typically the preference that if we are working in an area that is open channel, that we leave it open channel if the district is going to continue to maintain it, just for the ease of access for district staff to be able to complete that maintenance.
Thank you.
President Preiner, Chris, is there also an issue in regards to access to the floodplain when it's in a pipe versus not? Would that be an issue here?
Certainly, that would be a consideration that would need to be looked at if something like this were to be put into a pipe, and it would create additional challenges in order to be able to preserve that connection between the open channel and the adjacent wetlands. So one of the requirements, statutory requirements for our engineer's report is to consider how the proposed project would affect the utility of the system. And what we've determined is that there would be no change to capacity of the system as it's being proposed. And there would be no change in the drainage function, either upstream or downstream from the project due to this realignment. Again, what's being proposed is replacing the existing channel with something that is of similar size and slightly longer, but we've looked at calculations for the work and determined that added length will not modify the drainage function. Petitioners are responsible for the cost of realignment. That is not on the drainage authority. The district, after this realignment would occur, would be maintaining responsibility of the drainage system as proposed to be modified.
Chris, sorry.
Yep.
I want to take on to Mike's comment. What if the petitioner wanted it to be all encased underground and go through their project? And they were willing to pay for that? Is it really just the expense of us maintaining it over the years that would drive us to the open ditch?
Madam President, that's another good question. We have had some previous projects where they've modified the drainage system. One example would be, I believe it's the Goodwill site over in Blaine, just across the freeway from this site, where there was not a pipe of this length that would be required, but they did put a portion of the ditch into pipe in there to accommodate a parking lot that they had planned. And one of the considerations that we did have when we reviewed that was how was the district going to be able to complete maintenance of that system? And given the length that they had, which was longer than what was there already, but wasn't so long as to make it either inefficient or problematic for district staff to be able to maintain, we felt that was going to be adequate. And we recommended at that time to allow that permit to go through. So it's going to be on a case-by-case basis. There isn't necessarily a magic number of how many feet of pipe is good for the district staff to be able to maintain versus not. But certainly there are a lot of different characteristics, including the size of the pipe, that could make it a challenge, and the how close other objects are to the pipe in order to be able to make it work.
Okay, thank you.
And one other final thing to note about this is that the landowner will be responsible for maintaining responsibility culverts on their site, and the county will be maintaining responsibility of the culvert that is located under the county road to be able to maintain. Impacts, benefits, we have found no impact to wetlands, floodplains, or runoff rates that would be affected by the proposed project. And we have identified that there is a benefit of the project. The benefit is largely to accommodate the development on the applicant's property. So it's the benefit is really subject to the applicant themselves. So our conclusions are that the proposed modifications will provide benefit. They do not impair the utility of the drainage system and do not deprive affected landowners of benefit. And therefore, we do recommend the Drainage Authority to accept the engineer's report and schedule a public hearing to consider the proposed petition.
The first thing I believe is the resolution on page 2008. And is the date to be set in here too, or is that going to be a separate motion?
It's under item 2, President Preiner,
Thank you.
March 25th.
Okay, March 25th.
9 a.m. Yes.
All right. Go ahead.
Madam President, I have a couple of questions and such about this. First of all, I do not oppose this project, okay? so that's clear. But this is built in an area where there's a lot of upstream people to it. The main channel goes north, then it goes east under Lexington, then it comes south under 109th, then it comes south under the freeway, and back to Walmart and Goodwill, was it?
Yep.
Yes, in that area in there. And we have had some complaints from residents about the flooding in there. And it's a very flat grade. And so it's very important to make sure that the system functions and works at this. Yeah, and I want to point that out. But my experience from knowledge of people that owned that property decades ago and used to farm it, is that they put a pump on that puppy up right about where 109 is there, 109th Street, and one summer and tried to pump that sucker down so they could get in there and do something. And they were unsuccessful. They used that culvert that you're talking about to push it across the street and down. That's really a wet spot in there. So when I see the reroute coming over right to the edge of where that wet spot is, and in your first picture you had showed that little dark open water portion there, I want to be certain that when the maintenance road goes in there, that we don't have a floating waterbed situation. Now, experience with JD2 and Branch 1, and we've come to the conclusion we can't get in there and do any maintenance because there's so much water in there that the machinery, it won't work along the right-of-way. It's a up and down and unsafe and situation. And so I was hoping that some soil borings, or that the staff will take extra diligence in making certain that we have something that's going to work here, because that is such a wet area in that quadrant, and they're moving right on the edge of it. And so that's, I'd hate to see it, if that gets blocked up a little bit. You know, it's one of those areas where you could have you got a culvert, and so you're gonna build up some sediment, and it can back the water all the way up around the horseshoe back to Walmart and Goodwill and that neighborhood. So that maintenance corridor to me is a very, very significant and important item to make sure it functions. And I don't have any disagreement with you about the language in there. I'm just asking the staff and the consultants as this project goes on to make sure that we have a stable maintenance, 20-foot maintenance corridor, and it isn't like a waterbed. You know, that's my issue with this. But I have no objection to moving it. Maybe if the soil borings point out that it couldn't go so far west, it might have to come a little bit east. But that's something you folks have to figure that out with them. And I think it's important. Otherwise, having a maintenance corridor that we can't use is not a smart thing to do. Right now, we know we have a maintenance corridor in there because of the way they built it, and they didn't build it that far west, you know. That's why it catches my attention.
Manager Waller, that's a very valid concern, and in fact, we have had discussions even specific to this particular project with district staff regarding ensuring that the maintenance corridor is of a condition that is suitable for future maintenance, and that we don't end up with a situation where that maintenance corridor is just an afterthought for the applicant and their contractor. And so I think maybe one thing I can do for the public hearing is provide additional dialogue within our presentation here to specifically address some of those concerns. And I do know that we have soil information from the permit, and I can speak to that at the public hearing directly regarding the stability of soils, the water elevations through this area, and how we're going to ensure that that maintenance corridor is preserved for the future.
Any other questions for Chris? Anything? Okay, we'll need the resolution, please.
President Preiner, if I could, just to advance that to the degree that it concerns the board. Chris, would you see a need to amend your report at all to add that detail about the stability of the soils and that sort of thing? Or if I could rephrase that, would it be good for the record to include that information in your report?
I think that specifically, since we've had a manager ask the question about it, I think it would be appropriate to add additional dialogue specific to that within the engineer's report, and we could make an addendum to that within the report.
And then President Preiner, and looking towards your council, I imagine we might have some amendment to the resolution language to allow for that to take place accordingly.
Well, where should we-
Madam Chair,
Oh, please.
board members, my only concern about that would be procedural. I believe the way the statute is sequenced, it's the acceptance of the engineer's report, which is the prerequisite for then proceeding with the public hearing. And in which case, with the discussion on the record, it may be equivalent and fine not to amend the report specifically, but to simply have the engineer provide the additional information and documentation at the final hearing.
Okay, so we wouldn't need to amend it, just to allow that information to come forward. Everybody understand that? Everybody?
Yeah, I have no objection to that. I just wanted it on the record that we want to make sure we build something we can use. And, you know, in the past, we to protect that, because there's going to be more water and more need for maintenance, and that's important. But I don't have any problem with the idea, so.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that we have the, something that works. I don't want the staff going in there and having to worry about the machinery sinking up, you know, or that kind of business.
So with that, Madam President, I'll take a shot at this. I would move that we accept the engineer's report for filing with the understanding that at the public hearing, the engineer will augment its report by explaining whether the proposed access road will be adequate for our future maintenance needs, and that we set a public hearing on the petition and engineer's report for its regular meeting at the Shoreview City Hall on March 25, 2020 at 9 a.m. or thereafter on the agenda as determined by the board, and that we direct staff to provide notice of the hearing as required by statute and local policy.
Second.
Okay,
Steve, I'm sorry.
yeah, we have a motion and a second. So is that to be included in the resolution, or just as a separate motion?
That was, I don't know. That was it.
Let's
That was my
look.
motion, accepting
Well,
the resolution with that understanding.
Counsel?
Madam Chair, board members, I understood that to be a motion to adopt the resolution with the indicated amendment.
Correct.
Okay,
That was
we have a
my
motion and a second.
Yeah.
Okay, so it'll be a roll call. Waller.
Yes.
Wynant, absent. Bradley.
Yes.
Wageman.
Yes.
Preiner, yes, motion passes.
Madam Chair? Small matter, I'm just looking at the amended agenda, and this item is described as consider petition for realignment. And I'm wondering if I might ask for unanimous consent just to have that amended to say, consider acceptance of engineer report and scheduling of public hearing.
Unanimous consent, everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Amend
Thank
the agenda, yes.
Okay. Anything else on that is good? Check register.
Okay. Madam President, I move to consider the check register dated February 26, 2020, in the amount of $472,064.45, prepared by Redpath and Company.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Staff report? Any staff reports today? Yeah? Patrick, everybody?
President Preiner, I do have a number of items to note in regards to your calendar. If I can do it now or wait until,
Well, let's just go ahead.
Okay, last page of the packet, 241. You'll see the calendar, just making note of the March 9th, 7 PM, Ramsey County Ditch 11, public hearing in the city of Hugo. Note the Wednesday, March 18th, 5 to 7, the legislative reception. And then the following day, the 19th, from 7 to 9 AM, the legislative breakfast. And we did send out the legislative update that was provided by Maud and some of the new bills that are coming in to being, some of which we pulled from the agenda to look at when the full board is available. Beyond that, I'd like to announce the March 27th, the board retreat. You had met Erica Garms from Working Smart. She came to one of your workshops. So March 27th in the morning, I have a flyer here that I'll hand out to the board members. And then also April 8th, as you'll recall, is the proposed city-county partner meeting. We would like to get that announcement out to our partners so that they save the date.
So what was that date?
April 8th.
April 8th.
And that's at 1 o'clock, I believe.
Yes, that day you do have the board meeting in the morning, and then we'll have the partner meeting in the afternoon.
What was the evening legislative? The 18th time?
Yes, that's Wednesday, March 18th, from 5 to 7.
5, 7, okay.
Yep, legislative reception at the Doubletree Hotel.
I wonder if we could have a revised calendar sent with it, with the additions. Yeah,
Certainly.
so we can pull it all into it.
Yep.
Okay, anything else on the staff report? No? Okay, thank you. We were talking about the calendar, is everybody, any other questions on the calendar?
So what's this on the March 27th about the board retreat?
That is the, I believe you were here when we set up to have,
I don't think I was here for that.
I think Steve might have been missing.
President Preiner?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we met with Erica Garms. She came to your board workshop. We didn't have a date at that time, so we've been working to find a location and a space for it and, coordinate all the logistics. The proposal here is March 27th. It's a Friday. We'd do that in the morning, go over lunch, and be done by 2 PM. And that's what the handout is there.
Are we gonna receive more materials ahead, or is this,
I'm leaving that largely in Erica's hands.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think that's all for now. We wanted you folks to save the date. We think that's far enough out. And then I'll work with her to see what else, if anything, we'll provide to you.
all right.
Good.
Any other questions, managers? Managers update, Manager Waller.
Oh, man, I attended the legislative committee, subcommittee on water earlier this month. And one of the big issues that was going on there was private wells. And we have a lot of private wells. And we have a lot, I know there are a lot of shallow ones down in West Hugo that are in that old area. I mean, like 30, 40 feet. These are, when you see a map of them, I was just shocked at, particularly around Bald Eagle Lake. And the issue is about contamination in them from maybe nitrogens or other things in the ag communities. And it was brought up that there's a relatively inexpensive way to solve some of this problem, and that's to put on devices on your drinking water and your cooking water, reverse osmosis systems, which they say cost $300, $400, $500. It depends on how big a system you buy for what, But I found that an interesting idea that, we're always interested in water quality, and that's what this is. And we have, it's not just the ag community in Minnesota. There's many of us that live here in the suburbs that have, those are wells, and I think that that's something for us to pay attention to. If the state's looking to do something with their surplus money this year, maybe they'd grant everyone a tax credit for the installation of these.
We'll have to get in line for that.
Well, but, you know,
For their money.
that's basically what they're talking about, is how to spend money down there. And, you know, it's not just the non-metro area that has this problem. You know, I mean, we have it here. We have, for example, that PFAS issue. There's another one. And a lot of us have wells. And some may not have sanitary sewer now, but they have kept their private wells. And, you know, you draw water out of a 30-foot well. When I saw that, I was kind of, you know, that looks scary to me. But they've been there for 100 years or 50, 70 years, not uncommon. And maybe that's something for us that, because we're concerned about how we use water and how we're drawn out of the aquifer. I mean, at 30 feet, are you even hitting the aquifer? It must be right out of Bald Eagle Lake.
Manager Wakeman, would you like to report on Hawaii, please?
I mean, Bradley.
Oh, sorry, I'm looking around.
I wish I could report on Hawaii,
So,
but I can't.
just, Madam President, I, along with everyone else, received a letter from Peter Morrell concerning the sewage. Having lived on a lake that's been similarly dumped on, I know what the consequences of that are. I just thought we ought to, maybe at one of our upcoming workshops, discuss this and determine if there's something within our jurisdiction.
And if, maybe we should ask Mr. Morrell to attend the workshop at
Well,
the same
that'd be
time.
fine.
It'd be fair enough, you know, I mean,
Don't have a problem with that.
yeah, good. At least he'd know that there was some action to his letter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wakeman.
Well, I was the liaison for the last CAC meeting, and one of their action items that they had on their list had to do with proper communications and the use of emails. And it got kind of contentious, and I don't think that they came to a resolution of any kind. And I would like to see it come to one of our workshops, because I think it is something that we should look at and see if there's issues with any kind of rules, or if it was just rules not followed, or what the situation was. At least we should take a look at it and see if we can help them in some way to straighten it out.
Let's look at that for our next workshop. And any research or any, I don't know, anything that would go along with it?
Background?
Get background, what their process
Yeah.
is supposed to be, and maybe the minutes of that meeting, if that would be helpful.
I declare a non-email user.
All right, let's find out where we're at with that. That's a good idea. All right, anybody else? Go ahead.
President Preiner, if I could, Manager Bradley, the letter you referenced, was it Morrell was the name?
Yes.
Yeah, and that's Lost Lake.
I'd be happy,
Yeah.
I'd be happy to give you my
Yeah.
copy of my letter.
I believe it's maybe the petition and,
Yes, it relates to a petition to the state of Minnesota, asking that the state of Minnesota and the city of Mahtomedi address past damage caused by two breaks in their storm sewer, which resulted in putting storm sewage water directly into, I forget which lake it is.
The north
Damage-
half of Lost Lake.
North half of Lost
Yeah,
Lake.
yeah.
yes.
And it was addressed to each of our managers on
Yes.
this board, and since
We
it
always
came to us in an official capacity, I thought we should at least acknowledge it and figure out if anything, our ability or responsibility is.
Sure.
And my own sense would be, it'd be through the sorts of thing we did today, which is if the city comes to us with a project to resolve and fix it, and they look for some funding, we could look at that.
Very, very good. President Pryor, Board of Managers, I'll just note, yeah, there has been quite a bit of conversation about that. One of our staff, Catherine, had been invited to a meeting at the county where we provided some of the information we had about, you had some testing done for contamination and stuff in the past. But we'll gather all that together and we can refresh at that future meeting. Thank you.
Anything else? Now I'll have a motion, please, to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.